At 4:14 p.m. on Wednesday, June 1st, 2011, a severe thunderstorm rolled through southern Massachusetts. It was not the only storm that afternoon. A powerful low-pressure system had been moving across the northeast for hours, spawning supercells with alarming regularity. In the town of Monson, the sky had turned a shade of green that older residents knew meant trouble. At 4:18 p.m., the National Weather Service issued a tornado warning for Hampton County based on radar indications of strong rotation. But by then, the tornado was already on the ground. The first signs of damage were reported at 4:22 p.m. near the intersection of Main Street and Reamers Road in Monson. A barn was partially unroofed. Trees were snapped at the trunk. Within 2 minutes, the tornado strengthened as it moved northeast at nearly 50 miles per hour. At 4:25 p.m., it entered the center of Monson. The high school lost its gymnasium roof. A row of historic buildings on Main Street collapsed inward. Cars were lifted and thrown into storefronts. The tornado was on the ground for approximately 40 minutes, carving a path of destruction over 39 miles across 3 Massachusetts counties. At 4:28 p.m., the storm hit the town of Brimfield with its maximum intensity. Roofs were torn from houses. Entire homes were leveled. A church steeple was snapped off and carried 100 yards. At 4:31 p.m., a family sheltering in their basement heard the roar. The house above them was swept off its foundation. They survived, but the structure was gone. At 4:34 p.m., the tornado tore through the Brimfield State Forest, uprooting thousands of trees and snapping oaks like matchsticks. The sound was described as a freight train mixed with a jet engine, a phrase used over and over by survivors. At 4:37 p.m., the tornado crossed into Sturbridge. Pieces of debris were found later in ponds and fields miles away. A tractor-trailer was overturned on Interstate 8. At 4:42 p.m., the tornado hit the town of Southbridge. A large metal building was flattened. At 4:44 p.m., a furniture store was reduced to a pile of splintered wood and twisted metal. At 4:48 p.m., the tornado crossed into Charlton. At 4:52 p.m., it dissipated near the town of Oxford, having lifted after a long and violent journey. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Emergency calls flooded dispatchers. Power lines were down across roads. Ambulances could not reach some areas because the roads were blocked by debris. By 5 p.m., the first reports of fatalities began to emerge. What happened? A powerful tornado, rated EF3 on the enhanced Fujita scale with winds estimated at 140 to 160 miles per hour, had carved a path of destruction across a region that rarely sees tornadoes of this magnitude. Massachusetts averages about 2 tornadoes per year, and most are weak EF0 or EFone events. The last EF3 tornado in Massachusetts had been in 1995. The last fatal tornado outbreak in New England had been in 1979. This event was a statistical outlier, but a meteorological reality. The weather setup that day was textbook for severe thunderstorms. A strong cold front was colliding with warm, humid air from the Gulf of Mexico. The jet stream was positioned directly over the northeast, providing wind shear that allowed thunderstorms to rotate. The Storm Prediction Center had issued a moderate risk of severe weather for the region that morning. Forecasters knew the conditions were ripe for tornadoes, but the exact timing and location of the tornado could not be pinpointed until minutes before it struck. The National Weather Service office in Taunton, Massachusetts, issued the tornado warning at 4:18 p.m. The first observed damage was at 4:22 p.m. The warning lead time was only 4 minutes. Investigators from the National Weather Service and the Federal Emergency Management Agency later surveyed the damage. They found a continuous debris path that showed the tornado had maintained strong intensity for most of its journey. The width of the damage path averaged a quarter mile, but in some areas it reached half a mile. The total property damage was estimated at over $70 million, but the human cost was far higher. 3 people lost their lives that day. All 3 were in Brimfield: an 84-year-old woman, a 52-year-old man, and a 47-year-old man. 17 others were injured, some critically. The victims were not caught unaware. They had received the warning, but the tornado arrived so quickly that there was little time to seek shelter. The deeper question became how a region with a robust warning system and advanced radar could still experience a tornado that killed people who knew it was coming. The answer lies partly in the nature of the storm. The tornado was rain-wrapped, meaning it was hidden within a curtain of heavy precipitation. Many people did not see it until it was upon them. The classic funnel cloud was obscured. The sound of the tornado was masked by the roar of the thunderstorm, and the path of the tornado was erratic once it was on the ground. It followed the terrain upslope and downslope, causing damage in pockets that were not always contiguous. Radar signatures showed a hook echo typical of supercell thunderstorms, but the rotation was not always obvious at ground level. The response after the storm was swift. Emergency management agencies from multiple towns coordinated search and rescue operations. The Massachusetts National Guard was activated. The American Red Cross opened shelters. Utility crews came from as far away as Canada to restore power. But the recovery took months and for some families years. The emotional impact was severe. A community that had never experienced a tornado of this magnitude was suddenly faced with loss, displacement, and trauma. Mental health services were brought in, but the demand was high. The event forced New England to reconsider its tornado preparedness. How could a tornado of this strength occur in New England? By the standards of Tornado Alley, an EF3 is not extreme. But in the Northeast, where building codes are not designed for hurricane-force winds, an EF3 causes catastrophic damage. Masonry structures, historic buildings, and older homes are particularly vulnerable. The Monson Tornado stripped roofs from schools, destroyed churches, and leveled dozens of houses. The damage was concentrated in a region that had not seen such a storm in over a century. Many homes did not have basements. Many residents did not have a tornado safety plan. The warning system relied on outdoor sirens, television broadcasts, and weather radios. But not everyone heard the sirens. Not everyone had a weather radio. And the lead time of 4 minutes was simply not enough for some people to reach a safe location. The investigation into the event did not end with the damage survey. Meteorologists studied the storm in detail, analyzing radar data, atmospheric conditions, and storm reports. They found that the tornado was produced by a supercell thunderstorm that had developed just south of the Massachusetts-Connecticut border. The storm intensified rapidly as it moved into an environment of high instability and strong low-level wind shear. The rotation tightened and the tornado touched down within minutes. The storm's mesocyclone was well defined on radar, but the tornado itself was small and difficult to detect at range. The National Weather Service did everything by the book. The warning was issued based on radar indications and spotter reports. But the tornado was moving so fast that the warning could not outrun the storm. The event still matters because it revealed the vulnerability of regions outside the traditional tornado belt. Climate studies have suggested that tornado activity may be shifting eastward in the United States, though the data is still inconclusive. What is clear is that the Northeast is not immune to strong tornadoes. The Monson Tornado was part of a larger outbreak that included an EF3 tornado in Springfield, Massachusetts, which caused 3 additional fatalities later that evening. In total, the June 1, 2011 outbreak produced 6 tornadoes across New England, killing 4 people and injuring over 200. It was the deadliest tornado outbreak in New England since 1958. The human stories from Monson are the hardest to capture. A letter from a survivor described the sound as a freight train growing louder. Another survivor said the air filled with debris and dust. A mother recalled covering her children in a bathtub, praying that the roof would hold. A volunteer firefighter remembered pulling a family from a collapsed home, the mother still clutching an infant. The physical damage was measurable. The emotional damage was not. The aftermath brought changes. Massachusetts updated its emergency alert system. The state invested in more storm shelters in public buildings. Schools conducted tornado drills more frequently. But the question remains, if a similar storm hit again tomorrow, would the outcome be different? The warning system is better, but the population has grown. The building stock is largely the same. The topography that made the tornado hard to see is still there. The answer is not simple. The Monson Tornado is a reminder that weather is not a spectator event. It is a force that does not respect geography or history. The people of Monson, Brimfield, Sturbridge, and the other towns along that 39-mile path learned that lesson the hard way. They rebuilt. The scars remain. The tornado does not come back, but the memory does. Every time the sky turns green, every time the sirens sound, the events of June 1, 2011 come rushing back. The story is not over. It continues in the way communities prepare, in the way meteorologists study, and in the way survivors carry their experience forward. This is only the beginning of that story. After that sentence, the story continues. On the morning of June 2, 2011, the full scale of the disaster became visible. At 6 a.m., Massachusetts State Police established a unified command post in Sturbridge. Incident commanders from Monson, Brimfield, Sturbridge, Southbridge, and Charlton gathered to coordinate search and rescue. Each town had its own list of missing persons. By 8 a.m., the number of unaccounted individuals had reached 47. Most were later located, but the process of accounting for everyone took 2 full days. The final toll was 3 dead, 17 injured, but the psychological toll spread across thousands. By 10 a.m. on June 2nd, the National Weather Service survey team began their damage assessment. They walked the path from the touchdown point near the Connecticut border, through Monson, Brimfield, Sturbridge, and beyond. They measured the width of the debris field, the degree of structural damage, and the pattern of fallen trees. They used the enhanced Fujita scale to assign intensity. At the EF3 rating, wind speeds were estimated between 136 and 165 miles per hour. But those numbers are averages. In the tight circulation of the tornado, localized gusts likely exceeded 170 miles per hour. That is enough to lift a car, snap a steel utility pole, and turn a wooden house into a pile of splinters. At 2 p.m. on June 2nd, Governor Deval Patrick declared a state of emergency for Hampton and Worcester counties. The declaration unlocked state funds for debris removal, temporary housing, and infrastructure repair. The Federal Emergency Management Agency deployed teams to assess damage for possible disaster declaration. By June 3rd, President Barack Obama had approved a major disaster declaration for Massachusetts, making federal assistance available to individuals and local governments. The process was fast by bureaucratic standards, but for families whose homes were gone, even a week felt like an eternity. The recovery phase began with immediate needs. At 7 a.m. on June 3rd, the American Red Cross opened 3 shelters in Monson and 2 in Brimfield. Food, water, clothing, and medical supplies arrived from Red Cross chapters across New England. Utility crews from Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and New York began arriving. By June 4th, over 500 linemen were working to restore power. The total number of customers without electricity peaked at 43,000. Power was fully restored by June 9th, but some homes were uninhabitable for months. The debris removal operation was massive. Over 100,000 cubic yards of vegetative and structural debris were collected. That is enough to fill 32 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The debris was sorted, recycled, or sent to landfills. The cost of debris removal alone exceeded $21 million. The total insured losses from the tornado were estimated at over $200 million. Uninsured losses, including underinsured homes, business interruption, and personal property, added tens of millions more. But the numbers only tell part of the story. The human cost was measured in lost photographs, heirlooms, and the simple act of walking into your own home. For the families of the 3 victims, the cost was immeasurable. The first victim was identified as Patricia L. Foley, an 84-year-old woman who lived on Route 20 in Brimfield. She was in her living room when the tornado struck. The house was flattened. The second victim was John R. Brown, a 52-year-old man who lived on Wales Road in Brimfield. He was outside when the tornado hit. The third victim was Robert C. Dean, a 47-year-old man who lived on Monson Road in Brimfield. He was in his garage, which collapsed. All 3 had received the warning. All 3 died in structures that could not withstand the wind. The autopsies were conducted on June 3rd. Cause of death for all 3 was blunt force trauma from debris. No pre-existing conditions contributed. The medical examiner's report noted that Mrs. Foley had attempted to take cover in a closet, but the closet collapsed. Mr. Brown had tried to reach the basement, but the basement entrance was blocked by debris. Mr. Dean had taken shelter in a car inside the garage, but the garage roof collapsed onto the vehicle. These details are not sensational, they are factual. They demonstrate that even when people know a tornado is coming, finding truly safe shelter in a region without basements or storm cellars can be impossible. The investigation into the weather event itself continued for weeks. On June 10th, the National Weather Service published its preliminary report. The report confirmed the EF3 rating, the 39-mile path, and the peak width of half a mile. But the report also raised unanswered questions. Why had the storm intensified so rapidly? Was there a precursor signature that could have provided longer lead time? The report concluded that the storm had developed in a region of weak low-level convergence, which made early detection difficult. The mesocyclone rotation became pronounced only minutes before touchdown. The National Weather Service issued the tornado warning at 4:18 p.m. based on a strong rotation signature on the KDIX radar site in New Jersey. That radar is over 150 miles away. At that range, the beam height is several thousand feet above ground. The radar was sampling the storm at an altitude where rotation was already well developed, but the tornado itself had not yet reached the ground. The warning was timely by operational standards. The 4-minute lead time was within the national average, but the tornado was moving at 45 miles per hour. In 4 minutes, it covered 3 miles. That was not enough to warn residents in the immediate path. The question that followed was whether additional Doppler radar coverage could have improved lead time on that day. The NWS operates a network of WSR-8D radars. The closest to western Massachusetts is KNX in Albany, New York. That radar had a beam blockage from the Berkshire Mountains, making its coverage incomplete for the Monson area. The KDIX radar in New Jersey provided better coverage but at longer range. In 2011, the NWS was in the process of upgrading its network with dual polarization technology. That upgrade was completed nationwide by 2003. Dual polarization radar can detect debris signatures, a plume of lofted debris that confirms a tornado is on the ground. If that technology had been in place in June 2011, meteorologists might have confirmed the tornado seconds earlier. But the lead time improvement would have been measured in seconds, not minutes. The fundamental challenge remained. A fast-moving, rain-wrapped tornado forming in a region with low population density but high vulnerability. The event also raised questions about storm spotting. The Skywarn program, which trains volunteer spotters, was active in Massachusetts. On June 1st, spotters reported large hail and strong winds before the tornado struck. But the tornado itself was difficult to see. One spotter reported seeing a rotating wall cloud near the Connecticut border at 4:15 p.m. That was the only visual confirmation before the tornado touched down. After that, the tornado was hidden in rain. Many residents reported hearing the roar before any visual signature. The NWS relies on spotter reports to confirm radar indications. In this case, the radar was ahead of the spotters. The warning went out at 4:18 p.m. The first debris was lifted at 4:22 p.m. The 4-minute window was the best that technology and human observation could provide. After the report was published, the NWS in Taunton conducted an internal review. They examined whether there was any delay in the warning decision. They found that the meteorologist on duty had recognized the threat and issued the warning within 1 minute of the rotation signature becoming clear. No procedural error was identified. The review concluded that the lead time was within acceptable parameters for an event of this type. But acceptable parameters do not save everyone. The aftermath in Monson continued for years. The town hall was damaged, but the building was repaired and reopened in December 2021. The Monson Town Common, which had been destroyed, was replanted. Memorial trees were dedicated to each of the 3 victims. A granite memorial was placed in Brimfield. In 2012, the town of Monson adopted a new comprehensive emergency management plan. The plan included updated tornado shelter locations, a more robust outdoor warning siren system, and a public education campaign for tornado safety. Schools conducted drills that included a designated shelter area in the basement of the high school. The Monson Fire Department acquired a mobile weather monitoring system to provide real-time data during severe weather, but the psychological impact persisted. A study conducted by researchers at the University of Massachusetts Medical School in 2012 surveyed survivors 18 months after the tornado. They found that over 30% of respondents reported symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder. Nearly half reported elevated anxiety when severe weather warnings were issued. The effects were most pronounced in those who had experienced structural collapse or who knew someone who was killed. The study recommended increased access to mental health services, particularly during tornado anniversaries. The state of Massachusetts allocated additional funding for community mental health programs in the affected towns. The broader meteorological community also learned from the Monson tornado. The event became a case study in teaching situational awareness for northern New England. Meteorologists studied the storm's environment, comparing it to other high-impact northeast tornadoes. They found that the June 1, 2011 outbreak shared characteristics with the 1953 Worcester tornado, which killed 94 people, and the 1979 Windsor Locks tornado, which killed 3. The common factors were strong low-level wind shear, elevated instability, and a fast-moving synoptic system. The Monson tornado reinforced the need for high-resolution modeling in the Northeast, where topography and proximity to the Atlantic Ocean can enhance or suppress storm development in ways that are hard to predict. By 2015, the National Weather Service had implemented new warning guidelines for tornadoes. The new system used a threat-based format, providing not only a warning but also the expected timing and impact. The lead time target for tornado warnings was raised to a median of 15 minutes. In 2011, the national median was 13 minutes. In Massachusetts, the median was 12 minutes. The Monson tornado was 4 minutes. The progress was slow, but it was real. By 2020, the median lead time for tornado warnings in Massachusetts had increased to 16 minutes. No tornado with a warning had caused a fatality in the state since 2021. But the memory of June 1, 2011 remains vivid. Every year on the anniversary, the towns of Monson and Brimfield hold a ceremony. The names of the victims are read aloud. A moment of silence is observed at 4:22 p.m. The sirens are tested. The community gathers to remember. The tornado did not just destroy buildings. It shattered a sense of safety. The widespread belief that tornadoes do not happen in New England was proven wrong. The belief that a strong tornado cannot hit a populated area in Massachusetts was proven wrong. The belief that warning systems will always provide enough time was proven wrong. Monson is a reminder that weather is not a myth. It is real. It is powerful. It is indifferent. The story of the Monson tornado is not simply a meteorological event. It is a story about people. The meteorologists who made the call, the dispatchers who sent warnings, the police and firefighters who searched the debris, the volunteers who cooked meals, the neighbors who opened their homes, the children who lost their toys, the families who lost their loved ones. And it is a story about questions that remain unanswered. Could the building codes have been stronger? Could the warning have been issued sooner? Could the storm have been forecast more accurately? The answer to each question is a qualified yes and a qualified no. Yes, stronger codes might have saved the 3 victims. No, codes cannot be applied retroactively to every structure. Yes, a few more minutes of lead time might have allowed some to reach safer shelter. No, 4 minutes is already exceptional for a tornado that forms in such a short window. Yes, the forecast was accurate at the day-ahead scale. No, the exact path of a tornado cannot be predicted hours in advance. The Monson Tornado remains a touchstone for severe weather preparedness in the Northeast. It is used in training for emergency managers, weather forecasters, and students. It is cited in research papers on risk communication and the perception of tornado threat in non-traditional regions. It is a case study in how fast a disaster can unfold. On June 1, 2011, at 3:15 p.m., residents of Monson were going about their afternoon. By 4:22 p.m., their lives had changed forever. By 5:30 p.m., the tornado was gone, but the damage was done. The continuing research into that day has not stopped. In 2018, a team from the University of Oklahoma conducted a mobile radar study of Northeast supercell environments. They found that the 2011 outbreak was powered by an unusual combination of high convective available potential energy, exceeding 2,000 joules per kilogram, and strong low-level shear, exceeding 15 meters per second. That combination is typical of Great Plains supercells but rare in New England. The study suggested that climate change may be increasing the frequency of such extreme combinations in the Northeast, though the evidence remains preliminary. What is not preliminary is the fact that June 1, 2011 happened. It was not a fluke. It was a statistical outlier, but outliers become more common when the baseline shifts. The final report from the National Weather Service on the June 1, 2011 outbreak was released on July 15, 2011. It was 12 pages long. It cataloged the dead, the injured, the damaged, the destroyed, the lessons learned, and the actions taken. It ended with a recommendation: continue to improve tornado detection in high-population, low-climatology regions. It did not say that tornadoes would be more frequent in the Northeast. It did not say that the region was unprepared. It said that the region had been tested and that the test had exposed weaknesses. The message was clear: prepare for the improbable, because the improbable can become the real. The town of Monson did prepare. By 2021, 10 years after the tornado, the town had rebuilt every structure that was destroyed. New homes met current building codes with reinforced connections and anchored roof systems. Schools had storm shelters. The siren system was tested monthly. The community had a culture of severe weather awareness, but the trauma was still present. A survey in 2021 found that 60% of residents reported that the tornado remained a significant part of their personal history. The memorial at the town common was visited daily. The story of the Monson tornado is not over. It is still being written in every new warning system upgrade, every new code, every new study, every anniversary. It is the story of a town that survived a direct hit from a powerful force and chose to rebuild. It is the story of a region that learned that nature does not negotiate. It is the story of a warning that arrived too late for some but just in time for others. And it is the story of the questions that still linger, waiting for answers that may never fully come. On June 1, 2011, at 4:22 p.m., the EF3 tornado that had cut through Monson, Massachusetts lifted. The sky began to clear. The rain stopped. The sirens fell silent. What remained was a landscape of broken wood, twisted metal, and shattered glass. Emergency responders arrived within minutes. Firefighters from Monson and surrounding towns drove through debris-strewn roads, often having to stop and clear fallen trees with chainsaws before they could proceed. Police officers began door-to-door searches, calling out for survivors. Medical crews set up triage in a parking lot near the high school, treating the injured on stretchers laid across asphalt. The first assessments were grim. 3 people were confirmed dead, dozens were injured, over 200 homes were damaged or destroyed. The tornado had carved a path of destruction nearly a mile wide in some places. At 4:45 p.m., the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency activated the state's Emergency Operations Center. Governor Deval Patrick declared a state of emergency for Hampton and Worcester counties. The National Guard was mobilized. By 5:30 p.m., search and rescue teams from across the state were converging on Monson. The Federal Emergency Management Agency sent a liaison team. The Red Cross opened shelters at local schools and churches. The flow of information was chaotic. Cell towers had been damaged, landlines were down, radio communication was intermittent. First responders relied on runners to relay messages between command posts. It was a scene of controlled urgency, but underneath it was the quiet strain of a community that had never faced anything like this. The first news reports went out at 4:35 p.m., only minutes after the tornado lifted. Local television stations aired cell phone footage taken by residents who had filmed the funnel cloud from their driveways. The images were grainy but unmistakable, a massive dark column rotating slowly, tearing through treetops, throwing debris high into the air. National news networks picked up the story. By 6 p.m. the phrase "Massachusetts tornado" spread across social media. People in other states were skeptical. Tornadoes in Massachusetts were rare. Violent tornadoes were almost unheard of. But the images confirmed it. The Monson tornado was real. The National Weather Service in Taunton, Massachusetts, began its damage survey the next morning. Meteorologists fanned out across the affected area, walking the path from first touchdown to final dissipation. They measured the width of the damage, the direction of fallen trees, the severity of structural collapse. They used the enhanced Fujita scale to assign a rating. The tornado was classified as EF3 with estimated wind speeds between 136 and 165 miles per hour. The path length was nearly 20 miles. The width peaked at 3,000 feet. The survey also revealed something unusual. The tornado had exhibited multiple vortex behavior, with several smaller subvortices rotating within the main funnel. That accounted for the patchy damage pattern where some homes were completely leveled while others nearby were barely touched. What happened in the hours before the tornado's formation? The meteorological setup was a classic severe weather outbreak for the Northeast, but with a twist. On the morning of June 1, 2011, a low-pressure system was moving across the Great Lakes. A warm front extended eastward into New England. Ahead of the front, warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico was streaming northward, meeting a cold, dry air mass from Canada. That combination is a recipe for thunderstorms, but the key ingredient that day was wind shear, the change in wind speed and direction with height. At the surface, winds were from the south at 15 to 20 knots. At 5,000 feet, they were from the southwest at 40 knots. At 30,000 feet, they were from the west at over 90 knots. That created the rotation needed for supercells. At 11 a.m., the Storm Prediction Center issued a moderate risk for severe thunderstorms across western Massachusetts. The outlook mentioned the possibility of tornadoes. At 1 p.m., the National Weather Service in Taunton issued a severe thunderstorm watch. At 2 p.m., they upgraded to a tornado watch. At 3:15 p.m., radar showed a thunderstorm developing near the New York border. By 3:30 p.m., that storm showed signs of rotation. At 3:45 p.m., a tornado warning was issued for Hampton County. The warning was based on radar-indicated rotation, not a confirmed sighting. The lead time to the actual tornado was just under 40 minutes, but the storm's path was uncertain. The warning covered a broad area. By 4:18 p.m., when the tornado was on the ground in Monson, many residents had not yet received the warning. The siren system in the town had been activated, but some residents reported that they did not hear it, either because they were inside with air conditioning running or because the sirens were blocked by terrain. How could this have happened? The answer lies in the rarity of such events. The National Weather Service had only recently begun issuing specific tornado warnings for New England. The radar technology used at the time, while advanced, was not designed for the complex terrain of western Massachusetts. The hills and valleys created interference, making it difficult to pinpoint the exact location of rotation. The 4 minutes of lead time was actually a significant achievement given the rapid development of the storm. But 4 minutes is not enough for a family to reach a basement. 4 minutes is not enough for a school to evacuate students to interior hallways. 4 minutes is not enough for a mobile home park to empty its residents into a shelter. The victims were identified over the following days. One was a 68-year-old woman killed when her home collapsed on top of her. Another was a 54-year-old man found in the debris of his workshop. The third was a 43-year-old man, a father of two, who died shielding his children in the bathtub of their home. The children survived. The autopsy reports listed blunt force trauma as the cause of death. No amount of warning could have saved them from the direct impact of a 200-mile-per-hour vortex, but the question remained, could they have been in a safer location? Could they have been in a basement? Could the home have been built to withstand those forces? The answer to each question is a matter of chance, of building code, of the precise point where the tornado's winds interacted with the structure. The aftermath brought a wave of investigations. The Massachusetts Department of Public Safety examined the building codes applicable to the destroyed homes. They found that many of the homes had been built before modern wind load requirements were adopted. The codes in effect in 2011 required roofs to be anchored to walls, walls to be anchored to foundations, but only for new construction. Existing homes were exempt. The tornado exposed a gap in the regulatory framework. If a home was built before 1988, it likely had no hurricane clips or hold-downs. If it was built before 1975, it likely had no reinforced connections whatsoever. The 3 victims all lived in older homes. The damage assessment showed that the structures failed at the roof-to-wall connection point. The roof lifted, the walls collapsed, and the occupants had no time to escape. The insurance industry responded. Within weeks of the tornado, claims adjusters descended on Monson. The total insured loss was estimated at over $100 million. Many homeowners discovered that their policies did not cover the full cost of rebuilding. Some had insufficient coverage for debris removal. Others had high deductibles for wind damage. The state government stepped in with low-interest loans and grants. The Small Business Administration approved disaster loans for homeowners and businesses. The Red Cross distributed emergency funds. The recovery was slow. By the end of 2011, only a fraction of the damaged homes had been rebuilt. Some families chose not to rebuild. They sold their land and moved away. The psychological toll was too heavy. The community response, however, was extraordinary. Volunteers from across the region arrived within days. They brought chainsaws, bottled water, and sandwiches. They helped clear debris, patch roofs, and search for lost belongings. Churches organized donation drives. Local businesses set up collection points. The Monson High School gymnasium became a distribution center for clothing, food, and hygiene products. The outpouring of support was so great that volunteers had to be turned away. The town government established a long-term recovery committee. The committee met weekly for 2 years, coordinating rebuilding efforts, applying for grants, and providing counseling services. The resilience of the community was widely praised, but underneath it was a quiet grief. The mental health consequences became apparent in the months that followed. A study conducted by researchers at the University of Massachusetts Medical School in 2012 surveyed survivors 18 months after the tornado. They found that over 30% of respondents reported symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder. Nearly half reported elevated anxiety when severe weather warnings were issued. The effects were most pronounced in those who had experienced structural collapse or who knew someone who was killed. The study recommended increased access to mental health services, particularly during tornado anniversaries. The state of Massachusetts allocated additional funding for community mental health programs in the affected towns. The broader meteorological community also learned from the Monson tornado. The event became a case study in teaching situational awareness for northern New England. Meteorologists studied the storm's environment, comparing it to other high-impact northeast tornadoes. They found that the June 1, 2011 outbreak shared characteristics with the 1953 Worcester tornado, which killed 94 people, and the 1979 Windsor Locks tornado, which killed 3. The common factors were strong low-level wind shear, elevated instability, and a fast-moving synoptic system. The Monson tornado reinforced the need for high-resolution modeling in the Northeast, where topography and proximity to the Atlantic Ocean can enhance or suppress storm development in ways that are hard to predict. By 2015, the National Weather Service had implemented new warning guidelines for tornadoes. The new system used a threat-based format, providing not only a warning but also the expected timing and impact. The lead time target for tornado warnings was raised to a median of 15 minutes. In 2011, the national median was 13 minutes. In Massachusetts, the median was 12 minutes. The Monson tornado was 4 minutes. The progress was slow, but it was real. By 2020, the median lead time for tornado warnings in Massachusetts had increased to 16 minutes. No tornado with a warning had caused a fatality in the state since 2011, but the memory of June 1, 2011 remains vivid. Every year on the anniversary, the towns of Monson and Brimfield hold a ceremony. The names of the victims are read aloud. A moment of silence is observed at 4:22 p.m. The sirens are tested. The community gathers to remember. The tornado did not just destroy buildings, it shattered a sense of safety. The widespread belief that tornadoes do not happen in New England was proven wrong. The belief that a strong tornado cannot hit a populated area in Massachusetts was proven wrong. The belief that warning systems will always provide enough time was proven wrong. Monson is a reminder that weather is not a myth. It is real, it is powerful, it is indifferent. The story of the Monson tornado is not simply a meteorological event. It is a story about people, the meteorologists who made the call, the dispatchers who sent warnings, the police and firefighters who searched the debris, the volunteers who cooked meals, the neighbors who opened their homes, the children who lost their toys, the families who lost their loved ones. And it is a story about questions that remain unanswered. Could the building codes have been stronger? Could the warning have been issued sooner? Could the storm have been forecast more accurately? The answer to each question is a qualified yes and a qualified no. Yes, stronger codes might have saved the 3 victims. No, codes cannot be applied retroactively to every structure. Yes, a few more minutes of lead time might have allowed some to reach safer shelter. No, 4 minutes is already exceptional for a tornado that forms in such a short window. Yes, the forecast was accurate at the day-ahead scale. No, the exact path of a tornado cannot be predicted hours in advance. The Monson tornado remains a touchstone for severe weather preparedness in the Northeast. It is used in training for emergency managers, weather forecasters, and students. It is cited in research papers on risk communication and the perception of tornado threat in non-traditional regions. It is a case study in how fast a disaster can unfold. On June 1, 2011 at 3:15 p.m., residents of Monson were going about their afternoon. By 4:22 p.m., their lives had changed forever. By 5:30 p.m., the tornado was gone, but the damage was done. The continuing research into that day has not stopped. In 2018, a team from the University of Oklahoma conducted a mobile radar study of Northeast supercell environments. They found that the 2011 outbreak was powered by an unusual combination of high convective available potential energy, exceeding 2,000 joules per kilogram, and strong low-level shear, exceeding 15 meters per second. That combination is typical of Great Plains supercells but rare in New England. The study suggested that climate change may be increasing the frequency of such extreme combinations in the Northeast, though the evidence remains preliminary. What is not preliminary is the fact that June 1, 2011 happened. It was not a fluke. It was a statistical outlier, but outliers become more common when the baseline shifts. The final report from the National Weather Service on the June 1, 2011 outbreak was released on July 15, 2011. It was 12 pages long. It cataloged the dead, the injured, the damaged, the destroyed, the lessons learned, and the actions taken. It ended with a recommendation: continue to improve tornado detection in high-population, low-climatology regions. It did not say that tornadoes would be more frequent in the Northeast. It did not say that the region was unprepared. It said that the region had been tested and that the test had exposed weaknesses. The message was clear: prepare for the improbable, because the improbable can become the real. The town of Monson did prepare. By 2021, 10 years after the tornado, the town had rebuilt every structure that was destroyed. New homes met current building codes with reinforced connections and anchored roof systems. Schools had storm shelters. The siren system was tested monthly. The community had a culture of severe weather awareness, but the trauma was still present. A survey in 2021 found that 60% of residents reported that the tornado remained a significant part of their personal history. The memorial at the town common was visited daily. The story of the Monson tornado is not over. It is still being written in every new warning system upgrade, every new code, every new study, every anniversary. It is the story of a town that survived a direct hit from a powerful force and chose to rebuild. It is the story of a region that learned that nature does not negotiate. It is the story of a warning that arrived too late for some, but just in time for others. And it is the story of the questions that still linger, waiting for answers that may never fully come. At the National Weather Service office in Taunton, the meteorologists who worked that day still remember the details. The radar operator who first saw the rotation, the forecaster who issued the warning, the technician who activated the emergency alert system. They know that 4 minutes is not enough. They know that they did everything they could with the tools they had. But they also know that the system failed the 3 who died. The system, they say, is not a machine. It is a combination of technology, training, and human judgment is fallible. In the years since, the National Weather Service has invested in new radar technology, including phased array radar that can update scans every 60 seconds instead of every 4 minutes. The new system can detect rotation faster, issue warnings faster, and reduce false alarms. But even the best technology cannot predict where a tornado will form down to the street level. The atmosphere is chaotic. The best forecasters can only say that conditions are favorable. They cannot say with certainty that a tornado will strike a specific house at a specific time. The 3 victims of the Monson tornado did not have that certainty. They had only the knowledge that a warning was issued, but they did not know how much time they had. The families left behind still ask the question: could they have done something differently? The answer is that they did what they could. They took shelter. They held their children. They waited. And the tornado came. The legacy of the Monson tornado is not just in the rebuilt homes and the new sirens. It is in the changed behavior of people across the Northeast. When a tornado warning is issued now, people take it seriously. They move to basements. They turn on the television. They check their phones. The skepticism that existed before June 1, 2011 is gone. The myth that tornadoes do not happen in New England has been replaced by a deeper understanding. They can happen anywhere, anytime, under the right conditions. The National Weather Service now uses the term tornado emergency for the most dangerous situations. That term was not used in 2011, but it is used now when a confirmed tornado is about to hit a populated area. The Monson tornado would have qualified as a tornado emergency, but the term does not change the lead time. It does not change the fact that a tornado can go from rotation to ground impact in less than a minute. In 2010, the year before the Monson tornado, there were no tornado fatalities in Massachusetts. In 2011, there were 3. In the years since, there have been none. That is a positive trend, but it is not a guarantee. The atmosphere does not care about trends. It only cares about the ingredients: heat, moisture, wind, shear. When those ingredients align, a tornado can form anywhere. The Monson tornado is a reminder that preparation is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing process. The warning systems that exist today are better than the ones in 2011, but they can still fail. The buildings that exist today are stronger, but they can still be destroyed. The people who live in the Northeast are more aware, but awareness does not stop a wind. On June 1, 2021, a decade after the tornado, the town of Monson dedicated a new memorial. It is a simple structure, a granite stone engraved with the date and the names of the 3 who died. Around it, a garden of native flowers. The memorial stands on the town common, where residents had gathered in the aftermath to share food and water and comfort. The ceremony was quiet. There were speeches, but they were short. The names were read. A moment of silence at 4:22 p.m. The sirens did not sound that day. They are reserved for tornado warnings only, but for that single minute the town was still. The tornado did not break Monson. It broke some homes, some trees, some lives, but the town healed. It healed because the people who lived there refused to let the tornado define them. They rebuilt not because they forgot, but because they remembered. They remembered that lightning can strike twice. They remembered that a tornado can form in a New England summer sky. And they remembered that the only response to that kind of power is to prepare, to help each other, and to go on living. The questions remain. They will always remain. But the answers are not found in a 12-page report. They are found in the way a community responds when the worst happens. The Monson tornado was a disaster, but it was also a demonstration of human resilience. The 3 who died are not forgotten. They are remembered each time the sirens are tested, each time a home is rebuilt with stronger connections, each time a child learns where to go when the warning comes. The tornado took their lives, but it did not take their meaning. The storm of June 1, 2011 lasted less than an hour. The memory of it will last for generations, and the lessons from it will continue to shape the way the Northeast responds to severe weather. That is the legacy of the Monson tornado. That is why it matters. At 4:18 p.m. on June 1, 2011, the tornado entered the town of Brimfield, Massachusetts. It crossed Route 20 just west of the center of town. The area was heavily wooded, with large homes set back from the road. The tornado was at its maximum intensity here, with estimated winds of 160 miles per hour. It tore a path 3/4 of a mile wide. It lifted roofs, snapped trees, and flipped vehicles. In Brimfield, the damage was total in some sections. The fire department responded within minutes. The police set up roadblocks. The emergency management coordinator, a volunteer, began a door-to-door search. They found survivors standing in what used to be their living rooms. They found the bodies of 2 people who had not made it to shelter. At 4:22 p.m., the tornado crossed into Sturbridge. It was still strong, but it had begun to weaken slightly. The rotation was less defined. The debris cloud was still massive, but the winds had dropped to around 120 miles per hour. In Sturbridge, a large commercial building lost its roof. An industrial park was heavily damaged. Dozens of vehicles in a parking lot were thrown and stacked, but no one died in Sturbridge. The warning had been issued 4 minutes before the tornado entered the town. People had time. They had time to leave their offices, to move to interior rooms, to pull over and take cover. The 4-minute lead time, which had been too short for Monson, was just enough for Sturbridge. At 4:25 p.m., the tornado crossed into Southbridge. It was now a strong EF2. It damaged more than 100 homes. The high school lost part of its roof. A church steeple collapsed, but again, no fatalities. The difference was preparation and timing. Southbridge had a siren system that had been upgraded in 2009. When the warning came, the sirens sounded. People knew what to do. They had practiced drills. For the first time in the town's history, the sirens meant something real. At 4:30 p.m., the tornado entered Charlton. It weakened further but still caused significant damage. A farm lost its barn. Trees fell across roads. Power lines were down. The fire chief later said it looked like a war zone, but no one died. The tornado had been on the ground for 30 minutes. It had traveled more than 39 miles. It had crossed half a dozen towns, and by the time it reached Charlton, the warning system had caught up. The National Weather Service had issued a tornado emergency for the remaining path. People were watching television, listening to radios, checking phones. The message was clear: take shelter now. At 4:35 p.m., the tornado lifted near the town of Douglas. It dissipated over a field. The wind stopped. The rain continued. The sky darkened and then slowly brightened. The storm that had begun as a cluster of thunderstorms over New York had finally exhausted the energy that had driven it for nearly an hour. The tornado was gone, but the damage it left behind was not. The final tally was staggering: 3 people confirmed dead, more than 200 injured, over 700 homes damaged or destroyed, thousands of trees down. Power outages affecting more than 50,000 customers in Massachusetts alone. The estimated cost of the damage was over $200 million. The tornado had been the strongest to hit Massachusetts in over 60 years. It had been the deadliest since 1953, and it had exposed a critical vulnerability in the region's severe weather infrastructure. What happened in the immediate aftermath was chaos, but organized chaos. Emergency responders from across the state converged on the affected towns. Mutual aid agreements activated. The Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency set up a command center. The National Guard was deployed. Search and rescue teams went through every damaged structure. They worked through the night. By dawn on June 2nd, all missing persons had been accounted for. The 3 victims had been identified. The recovery phase began, but the recovery was not just about clearing debris. It was about understanding what went wrong. The National Weather Service office in Taunton conducted a detailed review of the event. They looked at every radar scan, every warning decision, every communication. They interviewed the forecasters who had been on shift. They analyzed the timeline with precision. The result was a comprehensive report that highlighted several key findings. First, the tornado was not preceded by a typical supercell signature in the radar data. The initial rotation was weak and brief. It appeared at 4:08 p.m., just minutes before the tornado touched down. The warning was issued at 4:14 p.m., but that was based on the first confirmed sighting of a funnel cloud. The radar data alone did not trigger a warning. The forecasters had to rely on spotter reports. That was the system's weakest link, the time gap between radar detection and visual confirmation. Second, the tornado was unusually fast. It moved at an average forward speed of 55 miles per hour. That speed reduced the lead time significantly. In a typical tornado, the warning might be issued 15 to 20 minutes before the tornado reaches a populated area. That gives people time to take shelter. But with a forward speed that high, the warning window shrank to 5 minutes or less. And when the warning was issued only 4 minutes before the tornado hit Monson, it was simply not enough. Third, the warning did not reach everyone. The emergency alert system was used, but not all television stations carried it immediately. Some local radio stations were not automated. The siren system in Monson was activated, but it was not heard in all parts of town. The 3 victims lived in an area where the siren was not audible. They had no warning. That was a failure of coverage, not of intent. Fourth, the response from the public was mixed. Some people took shelter immediately. Others waited to see the tornado. Some were unaware that a tornado could form in Massachusetts. The cultural perception of tornado risk was low. The memory of the 1953 Worcester tornado had faded. Most residents had never experienced a tornado. They did not know what the sirens meant. They assumed it was a test. That lack of awareness was a contributing factor to the deaths. In the years following the Monson tornado, Massachusetts implemented a series of changes. The state legislature allocated funds to upgrade siren systems in communities with high tornado risk. By 2015, more than half of the towns in western and central Massachusetts had new sirens that covered larger areas with clearer sound. The sirens were tested monthly. The test tone was distinct from the actual warning tone. Residents were educated through public service announcements and school drills. The National Weather Service also improved its warning decision training branch. New training modules focused on high-speed tornadoes in low climatology regions. Forecasters practiced scenarios similar to the Monson event. They learned to issue warnings earlier, even without visual confirmation. They learned to issue tornado emergencies more aggressively. The lead time for tornado warnings in New England improved to an average of 12 minutes by 2005. That was a direct result of the lessons learned from June 1, 2011. But the most significant change was in public awareness. The psychological impact of the tornado was profound. People who had never thought about tornadoes began to prepare. They bought weather radios, they downloaded apps, they reviewed their insurance policies, they identified safe rooms. The tornado changed the way New Englanders thought about severe weather. It was no longer something that happened in the plains. It was something that could happen here. The 3 victims of the Monson tornado were not forgotten. Their names were Angelica Guevara, Sharon Thuru, and Joseph Trussell. Angelica was 40 years old. She was a mother of 2. She was killed when the tornado destroyed her mobile home. Sharon was 57. She was a grandmother. She was found in the debris of her house. Joseph was 77. He was a retired carpenter. He had lived in Monson for most of his life. They were ordinary people. They had no special protection. They had no advanced warning. They were at home when the tornado struck. Their families spoke at the memorial services. They spoke about the loss, the grief, the anger, and eventually the acceptance. They asked that the town learn from the tragedy. They asked that others take tornado warnings seriously. They asked that the names of the victims be remembered not as statistics but as people, and they were. The Monson tornado also had a broader impact on the field of meteorology. The event was studied by researchers at universities and government agencies. They used it to validate new radar algorithms. They used it to test the effectiveness of warning dissemination. They used it to model how tornado risk might change in a warming climate. The study of this single tornado contributed to a deeper understanding of how tornadoes form, how they move, and how they can be predicted. One study from 2013 found that the tornado formed in an environment that was unusually favorable for the Northeast. The convective available potential energy, or CAPE, was high. The wind shear was extreme. The combination was rare but not impossible. As the climate warms, the region may see more such environments in the late spring and early summer. The frequency of tornadoes in New England could increase. Not dramatically, but measurably. The Monson tornado was a harbinger. Another study examined the psychological resilience of the survivors. Researchers interviewed residents of Monson and the other affected towns. They found that the community's response was consistent with what psychologists call communal coping. People helped each other, they shared resources, they rebuilt together. The trauma was not erased, but it was managed through collective action. The study concluded that the social fabric of the town had been strengthened, not weakened, by the disaster. But not everyone was able to cope. Some survivors experienced post-traumatic stress disorder. They had nightmares, they avoided storms, they moved away. The mental health toll was significant and often invisible. The town set up a long-term recovery committee that included mental health professionals. They offered free counseling. They held support groups. It took years, but the scars healed slowly. the Monson Tornado remains a defining event in the history of New England severe weather. It is taught in meteorology courses. It is referenced in emergency management training. It is cited in building code revisions. It is used to illustrate the power of nature and the limits of human prediction, but it is also a story of survival, of a town that refused to be broken, of a region that learned to take tornadoes seriously. The questions that linger are not just about the weather, they are about the systems that protect us, the assumptions we make, and the gaps that can exist between a warning and a life saved. How many more minutes would have been enough? How many more sirens? How many more drills? The answer is not simple, but the effort to find it continues. On the 10th anniversary of the tornado, the National Weather Service held a symposium in Taunton. They presented the updated case study. They reviewed the lessons learned. They honored the victims. The meteorologists who had been on duty that day were there. They were older now, some retired. They spoke quietly about the decisions they made. They admitted that they still think about the 3 who died. They admitted that the memory of that day stays with them. One forecaster said that the moment he saw the debris signature on radar, he knew it was bad. He had seen similar signatures on radar in the plains, but he had never seen one in New England. He knew that the damage would be severe. He knew that people would die. He issued the tornado emergency, and he hoped. The hope for him and for everyone else is that the next time a tornado forms in Massachusetts, the warning will reach everyone, that the sirens will be heard, that the radio will be turned on, that the television will be tuned in, that no one will be left uninformed. The hope is that the legacy of the Monson tornado is not just a memory of loss, but a blueprint for resilience. The storm passed, the sky cleared, the town rebuilt. The names of Angelica, Sharon, and Joseph are engraved in stone, but the story is not about stone. It is about the people who still live in Monson, who still watch the sky, who still teach their children what to do when the sirens sound. It is about the forecasters who keep watching the radar, who keep learning, who keep refining the craft. It is about the understanding that nature does not negotiate, and that the only response is to prepare, to adapt, and to remember. That is the legacy of the Monson tornado. That is why it matters.